Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Africa Asia Discussions. So, today we are having an interesting discussion about government spending with a focus on Kenyan government spending. And I'm with Mutuma. Mutuma, say hi.
Hello, my name is Edwin. I write on macroeconomic policies, forex, and Web 3.0. On my site, you can find at econversation.com.
Okay, cool. We'll share the link to Edwin's website. And so today we're having this discussion, which is quite interesting because we'll be speaking on matters government spending, and it's really a beginning of the conversation on what is government spending. Then we'll go on to speak about where the government obtains money for spending, and then we'll make a few more remarks. And in this case, we will start with, we'll be focusing on the Kenyan government, but then the principles will apply to any government, really. So I'll let Mutuma go by, highlighting like what is government spending, what are the types of government spending, and then we will carry it on from there.
Thank you. So in any economy, basically, we have a couple of components that do make up the economic equation, the growth equation, GDP. We have consumption, we have investment, we have government spending, and then we have net exports. So today, as mentioned earlier, we will be speaking on government spending. So you might ask where the government obtains money for spending. I believe we all pay a fair share of taxes, which ideally should be able to fully fund government spending. But if you look around, this is not what happens all the time, because when we have the government spending more than it's collecting in taxes, which basically is the revenue of the government, main source of revenue, we have something we call budget deficit or a government deficit. The government has to find ways to cover the deficit, because if it's spending more than it's collecting, we have a shortfall of the money that should actually be spent by the government. So a couple of areas where the government could be getting the money to cover the deficit, one could be foreign aid and grants. I believe Christine can tell us some of challenges maybe or benefits of foreign aid and grants.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that. And to pick it up from, add a few things also from where Edwin started and stopped on the spending. In this case, we are speaking about recurrent expenditure, and we're speaking about capital expenditure. So before we even go to speak about foreign aid and what the issues are with that, is that you'll be wondering, this money that you get from foreign aid, for instance, well, what will you use it for? So you can use it as a recurrent expenditure. So in this sense, it means you take the money as the government of Kenya and then use it to pay salaries and wages of public servants. So anyone who works for parastatus, the government takes that money to fund the salaries. And then also they can use the money to transfer payments for the payments that are being made in Kenya for the old people, and also the promises you've had in the campaigns that someone will get a stipend every month for unemployment. So we can get foreign aid, for instance, and then that money which we get, the government takes it to give people who are unemployed. But then also you can use it for capital expenditure to develop projects. We'll speak a bit more about that. But to go back to now, is it wise to take foreign aid, for instance, and use it to pay people who are unemployed, or to give any kind of recurrent expenditure, for instance, or even capital expenditure? And now the thing is that with foreign aid, it has conditions. Yeah, so you find if you're getting foreign aid from the US, it comes with conditions. You'll be told you need to spend this money in certain ways, and then it can be withdrawn if you piss off whoever is giving you the money. I mean, they're controlling the bank. So if you piss them off, you hear things like you're not a democratic state, or if there's a diplomatic issue between the two countries, they can withdraw the foreign aid. So foreign aid is a very shaky ground to be in. And then also it's aid. It's very discretionary on the person who is giving you. And they can, sometimes you hear government saying that they'll give you a grant, they will withdraw it, and they do all such kinds of things. So yeah, so that's the additional comments I wanted to make. I will let Mutuma go on to speak about like other sources of money for the government to spend.
On that note, we could actually have the question, for example, in the government giving transfer payments, how do they actually do an analysis of who should actually get this money? Should the money that we collect actually go to such transfer payments, or should how do we go about establishing a baseline for who should get the transfer payments and who shouldn't? Because a government deficit, it is okay to have a deficit, but at what point of the business cycle are you having this deficit? Is it during an inflationary gap, or is it during a recessionary gap? If it is during an inflationary gap whereby your economy is expanding, employment is rising, inflation is falling, then you might actually find that having a deficit in an inflationary gap, there is an underlying problem. Like, it's a red flag, because from there you're actually going to something we call structural deficit. I think in subsequent podcasts we'll speak in depth about such topics as those. But on to where the government obtains money for spending. Aside from foreign aid, we have borrowing. Might present itself in three ways. So the government could borrow to finance its spending from its central bank. Ideally, this should be a case. The central bank and the executive, the legislature should all be independent of each other. But we will see, as we will see later, we will see that this basically isn't the case often. Another way the government could borrow is domestic borrowing within the country. And then lastly, we have external borrowing, where you borrow from foreign countries. And you will see which among all this government borrowing is actually the best, and why shouldn't we do one over the other, or why is one actually considered uglier than any other. So I believe Christine can
take it up from
take
here.
It up, yeah.
Okay, so I think also on the borrowing, if we could start going in depth about the government borrowing from the central bank, you wonder how this is done. Well, to say this is done not just by Kenya, countries worldwide do this. What you do is that you go to the central bank and you tell them, print for us more money. So central bank print for us money, the notes. And then what you do is that we owe you as a central bank. And then now what happens is that the government takes the money that has been printed, and then it has an IOU written to the central bank. And then what the government needs to do is that it needs to look for places to get the money to pay the central bank. So again, it doesn't end with just borrowing from the central bank, especially because if you just print currency and put it in the economy without having any value to it, you're getting into a problem because of inflation, and the money that you're printing has no value backing it. So now what you do is that you can borrow from the central bank, but you need to be able to get money as a government to pay back the central bank. And now that's why the central bank borrowing in and of itself is not an end. So you take the money that has been printed, you can go to the domestic market and tell the domestic market, you know what, give us money through a government bond that we are going to issue to you, for instance, then we can use it to pay back the central bank. Or you can go to an external person and tell them, give us money, which now you take and give to your central bank. So you owe another person so that you can pay back the central bank. And it's mainly because you really don't want to have money out printed which you cannot be able to have any value to it. So you can borrow quickly from the central bank, almost like a drawdown on your account, and then quickly go to the domestic market or to the external lenders for you to recover the money and give it back to the central bank. Of course, there's a lot of questions that come with this, and I think we will do future discussions, but I will let Mutuma speak a bit about what is bad about external borrowing, and especially when you compare it to domestic borrowing?
So earlier on, I had stated that in an inflationary gap, the economy is growing, but unemployment is rising. Sorry, the unemployment is supposed to be falling, and the inflation rising. So this is a trade-off question. On to the point about external borrowing versus domestic borrowing. Okay, external borrowing poses its fair share of challenge. In my opinion, the best form of borrowing is domestic borrowing because you're borrowing in your currency. You might be wondering, so why is borrowing domestically better than that, or why is borrowing in your own currency better than in a foreign currency? When you borrow in foreign currency, we have something that is called exchange rate risk. This basically means if the currency in which you have borrowed is actually getting stronger and your currency is getting weaker, we actually have interest rates that you actually pay on the amount that was lent to you. So the amount will keep on rising as the currency gets on getting stronger. For example, in terms of Kenya, the Kenya shilling has been falling against the US dollar. We have borrowed so much. Well, it's not yet 100% of our GDP, but the interest rates that we are going to pay for the loan that we have are actually rising as the currency gets weaker. So we are not pegged on a certain amount of interest that is going to be paid. It will keep on rising and or falling based on the fluctuations in the exchange rates. So in my opinion, I think that borrowing domestically actually offers a better, I don't want to call it incentive, but it's actually better than borrowing externally from foreign countries and actually borrowing in a foreign currency per se.
Okay, yes, and I agree with what Mutuma is saying. And to add on to that, or to expound a bit, is that imagine like as the pound is gaining value against the shilling. That gain that the pound has over the shilling is money that the Kenyan government has to fund from its pocket to give to the UK, if that's where they got the money from. So and that's not the interest. This is purely coming from the forex exchange gains and losses. In addition to that, there's the interest. So again, foreign borrowing has that challenge, but also in addition to the forex exchange losses that potentially could arise from it, is also the fact that like currently the lenders, international external lenders, they have leverage over you in terms of, if it's like China, for instance, you borrow from them, you don't repay this amount, they will be at liberty to take the collateral that you gave. So for instance, like the case in Uganda, where China is considering or has already taken steps to take the Entebbe airport, that comes directly from borrowing externally, where you give one of your assets to the lender as collateral for it. But then also when it comes to like the IMF and like the US, and they are unlikely to take your airport or to take your assets. It's a different strategy from what China does. But then also what happens with that is that you get like a downgrade in your credit rating. And then there's also a lot of pressure coming from like your external lender. And the thing to say is that when someone is always controlling what to do with you and the money that you owe them, it means that they are likely to be the ones calling the shots on decisions that you make. So even if it's like foreign policy, such things will be affected by the money that you owe these people. So, and also when it comes to domestic lending, I don't know how many Kenyans know this, but this actually occurs on a regular basis, either through Mkiba, or government will announce and say that it's floating a bond, or it's like they want this money, and then they'll call upon people. And it has been very creative in the Kenyan sense, because it's not the big people only who can lend to the government. They have broken it down so that you can lend as low as 5,000 shillings to the government. And people like that because the return is guaranteed for the domestic lenders to the government, because it's a safe investment. Like the government is going to look for ways to plug in the debt if they need to. So I will ask Mutuma to take it over. from here.
So you might be wondering why, for example, are we talking about interest repayments and why is it bad? Well, technically, some of the amounts that actually go into loan repayments are funds that could be channeled into development projects. So basically, investments. So earlier on, we had talked about types of government spending, where Christine talked about recurrent expenditure and capital expenditure. For example, in Kenya, there's been a question of how are the loans that you're obtaining being used. Recently, we have had a lot of money being loaned to us from outside that have been used for capital expenditure. For example, the construction of the ongoing construction of the Nairobi Expressway. And you might ask, there has been controversy in the same because some people are asking who is actually going to benefit from the construction of the expressway. Well, we cannot answer to that until after it's completed. Other people are questioning when are we actually going to recoup the amount and actually this development project actually become an investment to us. Well, again, still wait to see after its completion. And I think afterwards, consequently, the government needs to carry out a cost-benefit analysis because, yes, we are talking about a development project in this expressway, but the question is, who is actually going to benefit from the same? Is it actually going to collect the revenue? Are we actually going to be able to repay the loan that came with the construction? Because we are supposed to be investing into assets. Development projects are supposed to be assets. In as much as we borrowed them, we actually have a repayment plan. But you see, with ineffective debt management, we could actually come from borrowing for development projects to actually trying to manage and contain a debt crisis. And is this something that we really want? Much as it is a development project, what is the benefit? And at what cost are we actually getting the development? Because you can't tell me that we are borrowing. Yes, we are borrowing, and then we invested that money into something. And this thing is not going to give us the benefits that we want. I mean, as a country, we are already plagued by debt, and the government should be investing into investments that could actually see us getting more money to repay the loans. For example, just recently they refused to. The government has withheld the terms that were used in the financing of the SGR, if I'm not wrong. And as Kenyans were worried, sick, and asking questions such as why is a public development project the terms for its investment being withheld from the citizens. These are questions that the government should come out and answer and say, okay, these are the terms that are involved in this. This is what was given as collateral. This is how long it will take us to recoup the amount that was actually put into the project. You could also ask, well, it was actually a good idea having standard gauge railway and having the train transport our cargo, but there are questions such as there are towns that have actually developed from the business that was coming in from the trailers. There was employment opportunities. What is going to happen to the people that were in the logistic business from transportation of cargo from Mombasa to the inland Kenya? So you have to sit down and do a cost benefit analysis to see this is actually going to impact the economy in this way. This is actually going to help everyone that is involved, because at the end of the day we want economic growth, but at the same time we want economic growth that is coming with lower unemployment levels and at least a manageable rate of inflation, because it has to it's a trade of one or the other. So I'll give Christine
to add more comments, and especially from what Mutuma is saying on the SGR. You see, when the government says we are developing this kind of project, then you should ask, are there industries that will be having cargo to transport? The infrastructure that you set up should be set up with the with a view or with information saying that this is the number of users that we expect. If it's going to be like for people transport, the SGR, for instance, ask how many people are likely to be using this, and then based on that information, then you can do projections and see at what point will you break even, at what point will you start getting a return from this investment. It's the same way when you're starting your own small business. You look at, who are my customers, where will I get this money from, how will I then fund it based on this information. Of course, the government is not a money-making entity, and therefore sometimes the government has to do things that don't give back any money. But when that's the case, then the cost also should take that into account and ask yourself, then where are we going to get money to fund this project which has no return? And definitely the government should be able to offer things that ordinary citizens cannot get at a high cost. So maybe subsidize some of the services, but then also then consider where you get the money from. So I think at this point, we can quickly highlight who decides on what the money that the government gets will be spent on. Like, the government has gotten foreign aid. Who decides? And it's at this point where we were saying legislature, executive, all these functions of the government should be independent of each other. And so that now it should not be that the executive uses the money that it has in its hands as a tool to control the other arms of the government. So that now I decide that I am unhappy with, for instance, the judiciary, therefore I will not allocate money to them. Or as a government, or the executive for that matter, I decide that I prefer more agricultural kind of investments, and therefore I'll invest more into that. Or to decide that I come from a certain area, which in the Kenyan context, a certain community which does these kinds of things, and therefore I'll invest more in those kinds of things. Essentially, that the policy on how to spend, it needs to be solid. It needs to be one that can be supported. It needs to be one that also can add long-term benefits, so that if you're looking at it, you're not investing into something because you're annoyed at one government department or over the other, or you want to support certain communities or certain projects over others, because at the end of the day, when this executive gets out and the next one comes, they'll come with their own agenda. And now the problem is that there will always be people influencing, using the money that has been given to Kenya for their own agenda. And that's a problem, because spending should ideally be focused on like the whole benefit of the whole country, and to give a return that's going to be perpetually beneficial to the generations to come. I think we will be coming to a close, so I'll let Mutuma make his closing remarks and then we will end it.
It was nice having such a discussion, basically on government spending. Christine was so fiery in that last segment where she was talking about the government using not being independent, using the legislature to control the other forms of government that one or the other arm of government feels they are not okay with. Recently, the government of Kenya actually cut the amount of money that it releases to the judiciary, and this was due maybe to a public spat between the president and the then chief justice. So basically government expenditure and taxation are fiscal policy tools that the government uses to control economic growth. And the problem with the fiscal policy tools is that they are implemented not by people who have the interest of the country at heart, but people that are actually pursuing their own agenda. When I'm in parliament, I want to force government spending into something that I will benefit from. Not because it is actually going to help everyone, but because I'm actually going to benefit from such spending from the government. And because I am in such a position as that, there is a conflict of interest that arises. How should we then deal with such a shortcoming in fiscal policy making? Should we do away with it? Should we actually set a bar of some sort for people that are actually going to be in elective posts? All these are things that we are going to consider. Other than that, it was nice interacting, it was nice learning, and it was nice sharing. So that was my time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. And we have more talks with Motuma. He'll come by whenever he would like to speak more. And you can follow the postings and his thoughts on these topics from a site, which we'll share on the link below. Thank you.